Today we will continue our exploration of the Canvas course management system or learning management system with sort of the last major topic, which is rubrics. Last week, we were working on together on an assignment, which is situated right here. What are your Thanksgiving plans? And we used that assignment to sort of explore SpeedGrader. You know, there was a couple contributions that we went over. You know, and there were sort of those submissions were given in a different format, and so depending on the format, we kind of went over how to interact with them. Long story short, what we ended up doing is essentially we used this manual grade assignment to kind of assign grade. And you know, after doing that, we verified that all grades appear in our grade book, which is all nice and fine. However, if we were to return this to our student, unless we supplied notes and comments with our grade, our students probably wouldn't find it very insightful and very transparent in terms of how we graded them. What were the criteria that we used to grade our students? How did we approach the grading process? And you know, if this is how we want to keep things, that is fine. But I think that students in general do appreciate the kind of transparency and clarity that come with the grade book, right? So for the purpose of this presentation, what I will do is I will just go ahead and remove those grades really quick. And you will see that there isn't a whole lot of them. I'm going to go ahead and clean up these boxes, because what we will do is we will actually try to regrade these fake assignments using rubrics. Okay, but before we do that, it would be nice to sort of access them and to see where they live in Canvas. There's a few ways in which they can be accessed. I find it most intuitive to sort of get to them from the assignment level. So let me go back to the dashboard for the course, and indeed to the home page which I have set as a module, and let me go over to the assignment that I'm interested in grading, which is the Thanksgiving plans. Okay, so this is what it looks like for me as the fake instructor for this very fake course. And what is important here is if we want to work on rubrics or a rubric that is specific for this particular assignment, what we don't want to do is we don't want to edit it. The assignment is fine the way it is. Instead, we want to go here and hit the Add Rubric button. Okay. And as it opens, we are presented with a Rubric Editor. So what we can do is, I don't know, give it a title, because here we are dealing with a written assignment. I'm just going to name it a written assignment rubric. Okay, a title is not, or let me put it this way, the title will be as relevant as it is relevant to you and as it makes sense to you as an instructor, so you can pretty much name it whatever you want. Okay, and that is going to be the first thing that we will add it. Now, we won't worry about find a rubric. We'll get back to that later. We see that there are sort of three columns, right? There's the criteria, the ratings, and the points. And honestly, they kind of deal with what the names indicate, right? So when it comes to the criteria, let's say that for this specific rubric, since we are dealing with a writing assignment, I would be interested in how my students deal with vocabulary. Okay, so I'm going to name it. vocabulary. And if I'm interested in a long description, I could, of course, provide that. So the use of vocab of the lexical units covered in class. Something like that. Okay, so this is going to be our vocabulary criteria. And then let's say that for the purpose of my assignment, the vocabulary will be worth, now we can keep it at 5 points. Okay. And then in terms of the ratings, right now there's only 2 of them. We can either give full points or we can give 0 points. I'm going to make it a little bit more granular here. So we'll add another score of 3 points. And this is going to be needs some work. And we can, provide further description as needed. And between 4, 5, and 3, I'm going to add 4 points. Rating title will be 4 points. I'm not going to be too descriptive here. And this will be 2 points. Okay, and finally, 1 point. Okay, so this is super granular, maybe a little bit too much. The point is that you can create these ratings and you can make them whatever makes sense in the context of your grading scale, of your grading scheme, and of the rubrics that perhaps you have already been using in your courses. As it is not too difficult to to intuit, you can pretty much wholesale import the rubrics that you have been using in face-to-face classes to grade the written assignments, your written assignments, into Canvas. It may take some time. There are advantages to that in the sense that you can then recycle them later, which we'll of course look into in a second. Also, another thing that you can do, and what Canvas creates a pretty decent framework for, is you can use, let's say, you can use things like the ACTFL criteria to develop a rubric based on. And so let me maybe open the chat here that I will use to share the actual document that I have in mind, which is, just give me a second here. Okay. There we go. So I'm going to share with you the most recent ACTFL proficiency guidelines, which come for writing, for reading, for the 4 basics: writing, reading, speaking, and listening. And there's culture in there as well. So feel free to take a look at it if you haven't already. You can use that to develop a rubric for your class, for the level of proficiency that you are targeting. But you can also sort of use that as a guide to look up some of the rubrics that are available online for free that were developed by other instructors in the languages that you're teaching, that may also be suitable to import into Canvas. Okay. So with that being said, this is the vocabulary. You will see that this is pretty much finished. But of course, if we're dealing with a written assignment, one sort of criterion is usually insufficient. So let us maybe make one more, and we can do that by adding a criterion to the rubric, which we do right here. Okay, and here you see that there's sort of 2 ways to do it. We can either create a new one from scratch, or kind of make a copy of some of the ones that we've created already. So what I will do is, in interest of time, I will just make a criterion I will use the vocabulary criterion, but I will repurpose it to reflect grammar. And this would be the use of Again, this is a very kind of vague, general, not super useful for real instruction, and I would not recommend using that specific rubric, but for the purpose of this presentation, I think it is sufficient. Okay, so now we have our grammar, which is another 5 points. Let's create a couple more. Let's assess also the organization. And I'm just going to remove the long description here. And I will create one more content. Okay. So, all right, this looks pretty good. We have a pretty elaborate rubric here. It totals to 20 points. But let's say that, at some point in the development process, I change my mind. I want to, maybe take away a criterion or edit it or, change it in a way that reflects my goals a little bit more closely. So let's say that for this specific rubric, I am not really interested in doing in separating organization from content. I kind of want to grade them together. So what I will do is I will remove this criterion here, and I can do it by clicking the trash button. Okay, and I will edit this rubric to reflect the content as well. Okay, and likewise, what I will also do is I will change the point value to 10. And what you will notice will happen is that Canvas will sort of automatically update the distribution of numeric values in ratings, right? So in my case, because I doubled the total points, it kind of doubled everything else, which is fine. But let's say that I am not happy with kind of how this distribution was managed, and I would be more interested in grading students based on point ranges, right? So let's say that if a student earns between 10 and 8 points, he or she gets full grade. 8 to 6, that would be 4 points on the assignment, and so on and so forth. Maybe let's change it to something that makes more sensible here. So we can do, I don't know, let's say a minus. This would be our A. Again, for the purpose of this workshop, this is not extremely relevant. These values could be adjusted and should be adjusted probably in a way that best reflects your own. So this would be C, and no marks. Let's do F. Okay. All right, so we've covered the range. We covered editing the criteria here. We see how the total is adjusted. So far, so good. I think what we can do is slowly wrap this rubric up and actually create it, actually publish it. But before we do that, there's a few more things that are worthy of paying attention to, and those would be the little options that we have available here. So the first one that says I will write free-form comments when assessing students, when we click on it, what happens is that all of the ratings that we defined so granularly are replaced by a white space, by a blank field that you as an instructor can use to comment in writing on the specific criterion, the performance within the criterion, and then provide justification for the score. Again, this is, this, some of you may find it more useful, the kind of dabbling with, how do I weigh the different points across the spectrum. Some of you may prefer to stick to the ratings, to numeric ratings, which is fine. For those of us who do not like to deal with points at all and who are just completely, qualitative, what we could do is just get rid of the points from the rubric altogether. And that way, we are only left with the rating categories, right? So the categories are still here. It's just that there are no numeric values assigned to them. Personally, I'm not a fan of that solution, so I will uncheck it. What else is here? The third box talks about outcomes, and you will notice that there's a little find outcome link up here as well. This is something that, by and large, most of us won't need to worry about. Outcomes are sort of top-down targets that are relevant, let's say, if you teach in, largely relevant if you teach in public schools, where you have to, adhere to strictly defined criteria and learning outcomes. In the, university setting, that is very rare. If it does happen, it will probably come from your department. If this is something that pertains to you, do let me know, and I will be happy to go over this portion of material with you individually. But other than that, because it just applies to so few people, we're going to skip it in this workshop. What we will not be skipping is this box right here. Use this rubric for assignment grading. And if there's one thing that you take away from this workshop, it is that this box needs to be checked. Otherwise, none of it will work. The rubric will not appear in the assignment. You will not be able to use it to evaluate and grade. It just won't function. And so this is super important to leave checked. More often than not, when people people come to me with questions about why this rubric is not working, this is the culprit. They simply forget to check that box. Okay, so again, super important to make sure that this is checked. Okay, so let us go ahead and create this thing. It's rubric object. Oh, okay. So Canvas is yelling at us, and this is on purpose. So what we are seeing here, let me just move this to the side a little bit, is that what we have defined or declared as far as the points are concerned in a rubric is twice the amount of what we originally assigned when developing this assignment. So I think that the original max score for this assignment was 10. According to the rubric, 20 points are possible. So Canvas is rightly pointing out that your students may be getting 200% of this assignment if you keep things that way, which is fine if we may want to do that, but chances are that we would like to address it in some way. And there's actually two ways to do this. We can either change the rubric values right here, or we can change the points total for the assignment. When it comes to these two scenarios, I personally think that the second one is preferable, and that means that we keep the rubric as it is and we simply adjust the maximum score on the assignment. And the reason for that is because once we sort of modify this rubric, it will stay in the system, right? And if you want to recycle it, then you may need to then change it again depending on the different assignment. So it is probably a lot more sensible to kind of keep the rubrics consistent and the grading consistent within them, and just adjust the assignments as you go along. Okay. All right. So this rubric is created. And as we have seen, it is it will be applicable to this specific written assignment, which asks for Thanksgiving plans. So rubrics are generally pretty useful for anything written, anything that can be submitted by link, or in ways that don't involve scoring via quiz. Okay. If you're using quizzes, then of course the kind of scoring is already built in. And if you're interested in quizzes, we've done a separate workshop on that, actually conducted by Vaini, who's with us today. That was pretty excellent, since she is the specialist on quizzes. But for anything else, rubrics generally work pretty well, and that includes things like discussions. Now, I'm mentioning discussions because it is not usually something that one would consider grading, especially, or in particular grading with using rubrics. And then if so, it is not immediately intuitive how we actually apply rubrics to approach discussions. So let me demonstrate, let me show you really quick how we do that. And to that end, I'm going to go ahead to home again. And you'll see that there is already a discussion assignment that figures in the module. So I'm going to click on it. The title is Virtual Thanksgiving, and it's essentially asking you, what would be better in today's day and age to have a virtual Thanksgiving or to meet folks in person. Let us add a rubric to it. We're not going to edit it. Instead, we're going to click this, it's called a kebab icon. And you will see that right beneath speed grader, there is the add rubric option. Okay, so we will do that. One thing to, maybe let me close this, one thing to keep in mind that I forgot to mention is that in order to use a rubric with your discussion, you need to make sure that your discussion is gradable first. To check that, we go to edit, and we make sure that this little box here under options is checked. Otherwise, rubrics won't be available. Okay. So let me go back here and let me add a rubric. Okay, and here we are presented with a box with a rubric editor that we're already pretty familiar with. Right? We pretty much covered it. We know how it operates. We can create a rubric from scratch, but one of the many affordances and conveniences of using Canvas is that many of the things can be recycled, right? So once, like I mentioned at the beginning, once you develop a rubric, you can then apply it to, across the board to various assignments, and then maybe, tweak it ever so slightly so that it's more suitable for, whatever it is that you're working with at hand. To do that, what we want to do is we want to find a rubric, and you will notice that that will take us to all the rubrics that we have ever created that are associated with our username. So, whatever you've made across all your sections, courses, it's all going to be here. What I'm interested in is the written assignment rubric. So I'm going to select that, and boom, here it is. Okay, imported into our discussion. What I can do further is I can edit it. I can change the title. I can make it discussion assignment rubric. And let's say that here I am not really interested in the organization and content as much as I'm interested in grammar and vocabulary. So I'll just get rid of this category altogether. One thing that we of course need to make sure is that we use this rubric for assignment grading, or else it won't work. And another thing to keep in mind that I haven't mentioned yet is that you need to make sure that if you're modifying a rubric, you need to also change its title. That means that you can't have two different rubrics that are titled in the same way. Again, pretty common sense. Again, it is very easy to sort of overlook that. Okay, so this looks pretty good to me. I'm going to go ahead and update. And this assignment is out of 10 points originally. The rubric is out of 10 points too. That's what it totals as well. So this looks pretty good. I'm going to close it. And just like that, there's a rubric that is now associated with this graded discussion out of 10 points. Okay. So we've made all these rubrics. We have been, let's say, making them over the course of the semester, adding them. Now, where can we access them? Where do these live? You will notice that actually there is a tab for that, which if we go to, we'll see that there's our discussion rubric here, there's a written assignment rubric, and important thing to keep in mind is that the rubrics that are under a tab under a specific course will only pertain to that specific course, right? So unlike with the find rubric feature where you can look up everything kind of across the board, here you only have what you have created for the course you've used for that course. And likewise, you can also just add rubric from this level, sort of in general. I am not a big fan of doing that because it's kind of that way it's kind of divorced from the assignment. I like sort of looking at the assignment and seeing what it is that I'm building the assessment for, or the assessment framework for. So, but it's just, if you want to, you can definitely use that feature, and it will present you with the rubric editor. Okay, I'm going to cancel out of it. Okay, so with all that being covered, let us finally go ahead and see how rubrics can actually be used to grade assignments. So to that end, we'll go to the assignments, and I'm gonna go to the Thanksgiving plans, which was the written assignment. And I will go to Speed Grader, which is where these rubrics will feature. Okay, so now we see that none of the assignments are graded. They're all marked orange. The first person is our Andy Bernard. If you are an Office fan, The Office fan, you will recognize the first and the last name. And Andy here submitted this short written assignment. Previously, we can always, assign the grade here manually and kind of provide a global comment on the assignment itself. But now we also have this view rubric option. So let us open it. And let us see how it works. So again, this is a fake assignment with a fake rubric and a fake class. So I'm not going to dwell too much on it. What I will do is sort of take a cursory look over the vocabulary. Looks pretty good to me. I'll give it 5 points. For grammar, no major mistakes. I'll also give it 5 points. And then let's say for the organization and content, could be organized maybe a little bit better, maybe a little bit more. I'll just give it a B. And you will see that because this is a range, Canvas will ask us to actually make sure that we are inputting the right number here, the right value, right? So the range is between 6 and 4, and here within that range, the B range in our case, we need to decide. So I'll give it 5. What happens if, let's say, we assign a value of 3, which is outside of this range? It will move to a different box, right? So it's pretty smart. It adjusts to, in that sense, just expand it so that the whole rubric is visible. There we go. It sort of adjusts to your actions. And again, depending on how well you define the rubric and sort of how much time you spend on it, the better it will work for a specific assignment. Okay. So what I will do is save it. And we see that now, based on my rubric, the grade is 13. And as we've covered last week, these grades from SpeedGrader are automatically applied to the gradebook. Oh, there we go. And 13 is right here. Okay. So let me just go back to one more time to our SpeedGrader. You guys sort of, I think, get the gist of it. I'm not going to grade the rest of them, especially there are a lot of things in the chat that I would like to attend to. We're almost done. So just, one more thing, actually two more things that I wanted to go back to, and let me do that here. So what you could do is, it is pretty intuitive how to save and recycle your rubrics. But what Canvas kind of sort of allows you to do as well is to share the rubrics if you want with your colleagues. There is no intuitive way or direct way to do it. But what you could do is you could create an empty assignment, assign the rubric that you want to share to that assignment, and then you can share that assignment with your colleagues. Okay? And that way they will also have access to the rubric. So let me now go back to our presentation really quick. I see the chat is filling up. I will attend to it in a second. Let me just go over what we've covered, okay? So we did a bit of an overview of what rubrics are and where they live in Canvas, where to locate them. We talked about how to develop a rubric, and within that, we covered the elements of the rubric, which is the criteria, how to define them, how to modify the different ratings and assign the points. And then we also mentioned how to look into how to edit a rubric. And moving forward, we talked about the various options and features that could be used to modify the rubric. So we looked at how we can turn it into a free form, how we can completely get rid of the numbers. And we also mentioned that this enabling your rubric to be used in grading is something that we need to make sure is always, always, always on, or else nothing will work. Finally, how do we publish the rubric, how we actually create it, and how we apply them to discussions. And then, within that context, we also talked a little bit about how we recycle and reuse them. And finally, we looked at how to access rubrics from the rubric tab, how we actually use them to grade things, and we really briefly talked about how we can share them with our colleagues. And on that note, I think it is safe to move over to Q&A. And let me go into chat. Okay. So unless you would like to ask me these things directly, what I will do is kind of go over them one by one. If you would like to raise your hand or ask things, just feel free to unmute yourselves, and I will do my best to address your queries. Okay, so let's start with Raise. So I agree that qualitative rubrics for discussions is a great idea, especially since those might happen in breakout rooms without us present, true. And having a rubric to define what criteria are relevant for a productive academic exchange is a good idea as well. When one clicks on Graded for the rubric, it can be linked to an assignment that grades as complete and complete without numeric assessment. Correct. Let me focus on this question here. Right, because complete incomplete is also a grade. Okay, Vaini, I missed the following. If you want to grade a discussion, you must check the graded option within discussion within a yes. So in general, Vaini, if anything that you want to grade in Canvas needs to be graded. Some of the assignment features are graded by default, like quizzes, or can be made so. But in general, you know, for discussions, if you want, or in case of discussions specifically, if you want them to be subject to grading, you need to tell the system that that is what you want. Okay, I would like to know that too, because I use complete, incomplete all the time for homework. Okay, we can look at that. I also second Vinny's question. I can't pinpoint where the check must be made in order to count. Okay, let me go back to our discussion assignment. So it's just going to be here, and virtual Thanksgiving was the discussion. So we need to make sure of two things: that the discussion is graded, which we do from edit options and check this box right here. And then go back. For the rubric, we need to make sure that use this rubric for assignment grading is also checked. That way, your assignment is gradable and your rubric is applicable to this specific assignment. Okay. I'll pass this on to Simon since I'm not sure and don't want to confuse people. Okay, thank you, Stefan. I can't connect my mic, have people around me. Okay. Cool. How the rubric looks on SpeedGrader. Oh, the possibilities speed up the grading. Yes, it's it does save. I mean, it costs you time to develop, but then it saves you time in grading, and it also, again, you can share it among various assignments. So like once you've put it together, it's just you just assign it. Another question, since I may have missed the comment, one can add descriptions to each box within one criterion, right? Correct, yes, yes. So the question here is essentially asking, and this is by Reyes, essentially asking whether you can make specific descriptions for each rating, right? Okay, so that is possible from the edit level, and there's a little edit icon here that if you click on it, it allows you to provide a description for, you know, what it means in the context of this specific assignment to get the score 5 on the vocabulary criteria. Okay, so this is super useful, especially, you know, if you are like I mentioned at the beginning, if you're interested in using, you know, any of the actual scales, grading scales or recommendations, and you can, you know, kind of wholesale apply them, or maybe not wholesale, but, you know, you can judiciously apply them to these rubrics. Okay. Maybe my question is not related to rubrics, but this is from Shigeru. But I was wondering if it is possible to put the grading category percentage info for the scores, such as final exam 25. Yes, yes, Shigeru. So this is something that we covered in the previous workshop. I'm sorry, not even, no, one of the previous workshops when we were talking about gradebook. So I'm happy to connect with you on that separately, because it kind of exceeds the scope of this specific workshop, unless we have some extra time left. You add percentages to the assignment categories when you set them up. Okay, so Vania already responded to it. Okay, great. You know what? Why not? Let's take a look at it. So, you know, here we're in the assignments, and we can either add assignments or add assignment groups. And those assignment groups would be what you refer to as final exam, tests, quizzes, homework, right? So I don't have any set up right now, but if I want to, actually, I do have assignment groups, I'm sorry, already set up here. And you see that the homework is one assignment group, and that is worth 20%. Quizzes is another assignment group that's worth 30%, and midterm final, and so on and so forth. So it is doable. You can configure it in any way you see fit, adding their own respective weights to different groups. Just make sure that all totals up to 100%, because otherwise it gets weird. Sure. Okay. I can't unmute. Some hammering happening. Okay, good to know. Following up on Vani's question, if you must make it a graded activity to use rubrics, okay, but then one select do not count towards final grade and be done with it, right? I mean, if you want to, yeah, that's another way to do it. There are many ways to skin the cat, right? It's okay. Jose Antonio has a question. Go ahead, Jose Antonio.
Okay, on my presentations, I have criteria for pronunciation, and I do have points for that. But when I do that on writing, I make sure that they know what are the mistakes that they made in pronunciation. Is that a way to put into the rubric that I write individually for each one that they made that they're having problem with the vowels or with certain constructions, etc.
Yes, it will just be a very elaborate rubric. So let me just use this as an example here. I can't really edit it from here, from this level, but like you see how here I have the criterion for the vocabulary in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is conceivable that you could have a separate criterion for, I don't know, diacritics, and that would come with its different scale. Like you get, let's say, out of 3 points, you get full 3 points if you've applied all of the diacritics across the board. If you get 2 points if you missed half of them, and then you get 1 point if you didn't apply any, or if you just like applied one or two. I don't know if this answers your question.
Um, not really. Like for
Not really.
example,
Okay.
one of the situations that happens in in most of my courses is that students have a difficulty um, pronouncing nasal sounds.
Okay.
And so when I give them a grade, I mark the points, but I mark the words where they didn't do the nasal sound. And so it is in writing that 3 or 4 or 5 words were not pronounced correctly. But I do that. I had to do it individually for each one of them, because they're not going they are not going to have the same mistake, all of them.
Mm. Well, so I mean, you could, create, so for this oral assignment, right? You could create a rubric that deals with the pronunciation of the nasal, vowels and consonants, or even separate between the two, right? And then you can either, do, okay, well, you've pronounced them or you didn't pronounce them correctly. And if you didn't pronounce them correctly, then you can let me show you here. Would you I will use this as an example here. What you could do, let's go to Andy, because Andy's already graded. So let's say that this is with the pronunciation of nasals, right? And I already gave Andy a grade here. But what I can do is, let's say that I have not 5, but let's say 3 points out of 5 for nasals. And then here I can write a comment, what words, thanks Lee, what words what sounds you've missed.
Oh, perfect. So you can make comments right in
Yeah,
front
yeah, you
of it.
definitely can. Right, right.
That's what I needed to know. Okay,
Okay,
perfect.
okay. Yeah, yeah, you can. This is true for any of these categories, really, and that is, of course, on top of the sort of global comment for the assignment as such. Okay.
Okay. No,
Mhm.
that's perfect. That answers my question.
Okay. Sure. Not everything should be graded, but it's great to use rubrics with everything. Yeah, I agree. Okay, Shigeru went to class. You're welcome, Shigeru. How do I use? And it's from Lee. Lee, it's private, but I'm gonna read it aloud. Okay. Yeah. All right. How do I use free form comments instead of ratings in a rubric in SpeedGrader? You need to set it up using one of the features. Let me show you. So I'm back to the written assignment here, and here's my rubric. I will open it for. Oh, shoot, I can't because I'm working with it. I'm gonna cancel. Shoot. I'm gonna close this. And let me open this. Add this rubric either because you don't have permission, it's being used in more than one place. Okay, that's where it's being used. Now let's try it. No, still no. Okay, so what you can do is, instead of, if you don't want to deal with ratings with numbers, you can just hit this box here, and this will allow you to turn this rubric into just written feedback, right? So which is another way for that, Jose Antonio, you can look at this specific question. So, again, like if we have nasals here, and we can have total points, and then just, explain that I gave you this number of points for this specific phonetic feature because you've made mistakes in words such as this, and this.
Hmm.
All right. Okay, there's a comment from Reyes to Jose Antonio. Very, very good. Uh, okay. Vani's going to class. Thank you, Vani. Good Thanksgiving to you too. Okay. I think that pretty much covers it. Is there anything else? Any other burning questions or not so burning questions?